Blake, have you ever stepped in cat poop in your house?
I hope nobody knows the chilling sensation of cat throw-up spreading beneath their toes like I do.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who has 2 cats that he loves more than 99.9% of any human he's ever met. And I'm here with my boss, who doesn't like cats, but he really hates his dog, Ellie, even more, Toby Walters.
I have so many questions that immediately pop up. Number one, am I part of the 99.9% of humans you don't like?
You know, Toby...
And how about our listening audience?
I don't want to fluff your ego, but I think you might make it in that 1%. But I will tell you this. I've got family that I would put in the 99%. Like, my cats rank pretty high for me. So.
I think we all have those family that we're like, only because God made me. But also, is that our most disturbing, intro of all time?
I don't know, man. We've had some pretty bad ones.
I know, that's a pretty bad one. But I have a story,
okay.
And it's, luckily it wasn't me. Now, Blake, you know, I have a dog that does just disgusting dog things. And I'm like, come on, dog. Like, she will bring things into the house and just the other 2 weeks ago. So luckily I was out when this happened, but my parents were in town visiting. So my dog Ellie comes in, throws up, and as Shelly goes to clean it up, she realized that something in the throw up has a tail.
Nope. Stop.
And so she just backs off. She's like, nope, not anything I'm doing. She yells for my dad. She's like, Jim, come help. So my dad cleaned it up. But
that's because your dad is the nicest man that I've ever met.
Well,
you should have made your kids do it. This is why you have children.
You assume the kids would do it? I mean, nice try.
I'll tell you right now, if someone out there can find a way to get rid of Toby's dog and his wife and daughter are okay with it, he will give you 20% of church gear.
That's the problem is, having my wife and kids be okay with it because they love the dog. But anyways, this happened to a friend of ours. She was getting ready in the morning. So she took a shower and was getting ready. And earlier in the morning, her husband had gotten up, and he's actually a doctor. So he often gets up really early. And so he had woken up and he had walked downstairs and, had breakfast, got ready, and then left and went to work. And so a little later in the morning, she had gotten up, got ready. So she had showered and she was going to do some laundry. So she showered, she's all clean. She has her robe on. She picks up the laundry basket to go downstairs. And as she is walking down the hardwood stairs, she steps in dog poop, fresh dog poop on the hardwood stairs.
Well, at least it was fresh.
Slips.
No.
Slides down the stairs so that the dog poop goes all the way up her back and into her hair. And laundry goes everywhere. And she's at the bottom of these stairs. She's okay. She's not hurt other than she's going to murder her dog now. And she said she just screamed. And the funniest part about the story is that when she told her husband later that day, he was like, oh yeah, I stepped over that. I figured you'd pick it up later.
So now is her husband and dog buried in the same hole?
Exactly.
I'm going to have to mark this episode explicit after that story. Well, I'll tell you.
Can you give us your cat story real quick?
Well, I mean, there's not really a story as much as just
you stepped
cats throw up a lot. And when you walk around in the darkness like I do, because I'm cheap, I don't want to pay that electric bill. Every now and then your feet just... Oh, it's a bad sensation.
I think everybody that owns a pet has experienced some of these moments of just horrifying, oh yeah, there's a wild animal that lives in my house, and sometimes you have to deal with the consequences of that.
Oh, 100%. I literally vacuum my house every week, and it's just cat hair, straight cat. Well, and there's some of my wife's hair because she's got a lot of hair, but it's just I vacuum just for these freaking cats, but I love them. I can't help it.
I don't know why we subject ourselves to these tortures.
Well, at least I get a lot of love and affection. I like my cats almost every second of the day, but your dog is just about.
Well, she at least keeps my family happy, so that's one thing.
How much is that really worth, though?
I don't know.
Okay, well, speaking of a man who's probably an expert in all kinds of animal droppings, from where he hails from, the Media Missionary at Creekside Church in Alaska, David Horing. Dude, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, guys.
Do you experience a lot of animal droppings out there in Alaska? Because you guys have legit animals.
I'll plead the fifth on that one. At least the temptation is there to do that. But I will say it's kind of important to know the difference between bear and moose droppings when you're out in the country, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, David here, his is not a funny story. His is like you could get eaten alive.
My dog tries to eat me alive sometimes.
That's true. Toby's dog is quite aggressive.
Yeah.
So, David, you've got 4 truths and a lie here. I'm feeling confident, Toby. Normally we have 6, so we've got a good shot.
Although I'm feeling a lack of confidence in his counting skills. We've had this a lot recently. The segment's called 5 Truths and a Lie, and then people send us 4.
But I never correct it because it makes it easier for us to win. So,
That's true. It gives us a better chance.
But I guess it's even worse when we lose.
That is pretty embarrassing for us.
All right, number 1. I have been a missionary to remote Native Alaskan people groups for 22 years. I don't believe that. He's not old enough for that. Number 2, I used to drive an ice cream truck.
I want to know if he still drives that truck. Maybe that's the lie and he still drives it and we can get ice cream.
And is it cheap to drive in Alaska because he doesn't have to cool it at all? Like it just stays cold.
That's legit, yeah.
Number 3, I'm a pilot.
I tend to believe that because I figure everyone in Alaska is a pilot.
I was going to say, doesn't everyone in Alaska fly to work?
Yeah, you have to. It's the only way to get there.
Number 4, I was once in a standoff with 3 bears at the same time.
I want that to be true so bad.
What if that's the lie because it's 4 bears?
Okay, let's find out. Yeah.
What a 4 bear. All right, number 5, I'm a shotgun coach. Okay, I love that one because it's so specific. It's not like a gun coach. He's like a shotgun coach.
And I didn't even know that was a thing, but I guess if
maybe it's not.
Teach someone how to shoot with shotguns, you're a shotgun coach.
I'll tell you what, in high school, I shot a shotgun at a shooting range with my dad, and it shot me back like 3 feet. And so, I mean, the shotguns are no joke.
So maybe if that's true about him, he can teach you. I'm going to send you to Alaska, Blake. And
I don't...
David's going to teach you a few things about being manly.
I don't think I would make it.
No, I don't think so either. I'm waffling between number 2 and 3. I think either the lie is that he used to drive an ice cream truck or he's a pilot. I'm going to go with pilot. I feel like, we think obviously everybody can fly like a prop plane up there, but I'm just going to assume he threw that in to throw us off.
I'm going to say it's number 1 just because I'm so suspicious of numbers. It could be 23 years, 24 years, and he just says 22. So, David, we're locking in.
All right. Well, the lie is that I am a pilot.
Yes!
So
That's
you
it,
got
Blake.
one there.
You're going to Alaska.
I'm actually a student pilot. I've soloed and I've passed my ground school, but I have not taken my cross countries and finished my night flights and landing at a towered airport. So I'm on the path, but I'm not quite there yet.
So what you're saying is that I am right and Blake is wrong.
Yep, that's what I'm saying.
Yes. David, our private messages were ahead of time. We're supposed. So
you didn't send me enough money.
Enough. See, truly, I actually cheated there because when I was when I was stalking you to come up with good questions for this, I saw you in a plane. What looked like you were flying it. So I was like, oh, I got this. He's not a pilot. Toby's a dummy. I'm going to win.
So you can't even cheat right.
It was accidental cheating, but still. Okay.
All right. Which one of these do we want to
I want to hear about being a shotgun coach, and were you a shotgun coach before you got in the standoff with the Bears? Is that how you survived?
Actually, no. I started being a shotgun coach about 3 years ago, working with a group of junior high and high school students, and we go out and there's a shotgun field, actually a world-class clay and trap shooting facility just a few minutes from our house here. And so we teach junior high and high school kids how to shoot.
That's fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Do you I don't know what it's called, like the track and pull? Is that what it's called when you shoot like targets up into the sky?
Yeah, we have machines that launch the clay pigeons up there, and trap and skeet are the two disciplines that we work with.
So can you shoot one of those like after you launch it?
Well, we launch them remote, so we've got a electronic device that we push a button on and it sends it. And so yeah, you can if you're ready for it, you can launch it. And
I think
shoot
we're
it
wondering, can you? Like, are you skilled enough that you're pretty good shot with those things?
I am okay. I'm much better with a rifle than a shotgun. I'm much better at more stationary targets. My 16-year-old son can kick my tail when it comes to shooting the shotgun targets. He's pretty good.
Well, truly, the fact that you've ever even done it once is amazing to me. I could not do that.
Well,
So you've been an ice cream truck, or you had an ice cream truck? How long did that go? Was that the teen years?
I did that for a while when I was in college. I had a friend who owned the truck, and he was out of state for a while and said, hey, if you want to drive the truck, go for it. And it was the most fun I've ever had in any job. It's a kick in the pants. You know, the weather's nice. You're out there. The only thing is the same 5 songs get a little repetitious.
What was the?
But there's...
What was your favorite ice cream flavor on the truck? I'm sure you had to eat some, right?
I'm one of these nutty buddy type of guys. You know, that's kind of one of my favorites. And the Choco Taco is hard to beat too.
I've heard good things about the Choco Taco.
I'm thinking that, like, when I get to the point where I'm ready to retire from church gear and I hand over the reins to anybody but you, Blake,
It's going to be me.
Driving an ice cream truck sounds like a blast.
It's fun.
I think, Blake, you would be too tempted to eat all the ice cream.
Oh, I'm 25 pounds up now. I'd be 50 on my second day. Well, then you could use the truck, Toby, to hit Ellie, and then you'd be done with your dog. Okay, so tell us, did you use the ice cream truck or the shotgun to get out of your standoff with the bears?
Oh boy, that's a whole interesting story in and of itself. But we used an empty rifle. They left us with a rifle that they said, hey, if anything comes into camp, you know, here you go. We assumed the rifle was loaded. And when the bears came into camp and were on their hind legs coming after us, we pulled the trigger and heard a loud click. So if anybody leaves you a gun, first thing to do is check and make sure there's a round in the chamber. And then when that didn't work, my buddy and I looked at each other with eyeballs the size of dinner plates and started screaming and yelling and jumping up and down, waving our hands above our heads. And with 2 of us doing that, it was enough for the 3 bears to turn around and walk away. Thank you, Lord.
Wow. Our eyes are as big as saucers, Blake. Like just listening to the story.
I got to tell you, David, I would rather fight 4 dudes than face 1 bear. I'm shocked that worked.
See, we would totally, Blake, we would give you the gun without any bullets in it because we'd figure, A, nothing's going to happen, and B, if you had bullets, you'd kill somebody.
Oh, I'm too scared to pick up a gun, Toby. You know me.
But it's usually like we give you a mic and the cord isn't plugged in anything. So we're like, here, talking to this mic, and you just keep going and going and going and going.
I'm just so impressed that you got, because like you did the right thing, obviously, but that's the scary thing. It feels better to run. So nice resolve.
Yeah. Yes.
Did anyone?
I think honestly, we were too scared to run. Probably, in reality, it was just one of those moments of suspended disbelief.
I'm not going to overly spiritualize this, but I think the Lord was like, David, you still got to keep doing my good work and kept him alive because that's terrifying. Well, speak.
Oh, I wanted to. So he was telling us a real quick story right before we started the episode, and David, tell us about the mic that you're using.
Well, I am so blessed and privileged to be using a really nice Mojave mic. And one of the things that I try and do living up here in Alaska is it's really easy to be a big fish in a small pond up here, especially with regard to tech. And so I try and get out of state at least once every 2 years and attend a conference somewhere in the United States where I can get some media training and then do a bunch of church tours. But I went to the last year's MXU conference down in Dallas, Texas. And while I was at the conference, you know, they were giving T-shirts and caps and different things away for different things. And it just so happened that they said, hey, we've got a prize for the person who came from the furthest distance. And Wasilla, Alaska to Dallas, Texas happened to be the furthest distance. And so I ended up with a gorgeous Mojave mic that I hope sounds great. I think it does, but I may be a little biased.
Well, I think your voice sounds great, but the microphone is capturing it in a beautiful fashion.
Oh, totally.
There we go.
He's got a great, beautiful, booming voice that you'd love to hear on comms.
And then I was thinking, is he our furthest podcast guest? But I realized that no, we had Wally Grant all the way in Africa. So I feel like David's
great.
Coming in at number 2 right now.
Well, he's our furthest United States guest.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to beat him. I wonder if Hawaii would win. We'd have to look at that on a map.
Yeah, that's a good question. But I think maybe he should get your mic as a prize.
Oh, totally.
I can always use another mic.
Yeah.
We can ship that for sure. Our head shipper is actually from Alaska, born and raised. That's why he's so capable.
There you go.
Well, hey, you already touched on this. And this was one of our questions. Being a remote tech, a lot of our techs feel isolated in their role. You're literally in a different part of the country. So how do you build community amongst other tech leaders, especially when you're so far away?
Yeah, exactly. Traveling is a big part of it. Also, anytime I go anywhere, if it's a vacation, if it's to a conference, if I'm out of state, I am ringing the phones or putting on social media, hey, I'm a media guy from Alaska in your community. Is there anybody that's willing to let me come and just sit in on one of your worship rehearsals or willing to give me a tech tour? And I have been very proactive about that and have been privileged to tour and meet a lot of people at churches from Kansas to Oregon to Portland to Texas to Oklahoma, all over the place. Just when I go somewhere, I make a concerted effort to do that. And then I have my little black book, and I keep notes in there. And every once in a while, these people will link up on Facebook or Instagram. And if I have a question, I'll hit them up with a quick email and build relationship there. But that's been one. Podcasts are huge. Your guys' podcast, MXU, I really started following Andrew Stone way back in the day. Did a lot of DMX Lite programming as I was listening to Andrew Stone on podcasts and different tech podcasts. And then the other thing I do is a lot of reading. I've got 3 media books that have really helped train me in media and helped me realize that even though I'm up here in a semi-isolated area or environment, we're all part of the body of Christ, brothers and sisters. Even though we're far apart, there's a community there, just knowing that we're all working toward a common goal.
What are those books, David?
I've got 3 that I teach a media and ministry class at Alaska Bible College, and these are textbooks that I use in my class. One is I Love Jesus, but I Hate Christmas by Todd Elliott.
We love Todd.
Oh,
I was going to say.
Todd literally burned me down recently.
There you go. Okay.
On social media.
There you go. Well, that's a great book. I think everybody ought to read that book if you're in church tech in any way, small church, large church. Another one is Systematic Creativity by Wes Hartley. He was the media pastor at Lake Point for several years in Dallas. And then the third one is The Heart of Technical Excellence by Kurt Taipei. Those 3 books have been very, very influential in helping me come up with media strategies and methods.
That's great. Should we get those in the show notes for our crew?
Oh, 100%. Well, now I'm thinking, David, you've joined many marketing staff meeting. I'm thinking we should do a podcast giveaway where we give away like 3 of each of those books if you reshare the pod and something like, you never know. Just ship someone a book.
Totally. And a shotgun lesson from David Horning. Yeah, that would be awesome.
When you learn how to ship shotgun lessons, you let me know.
All expenses paid by you.
Sure.
So, David, tell us just a little bit about the tech community up in Alaska. I know, physically, we're so far removed from just the experience up there. So, what's it like up there? Is there a community of techs that you're able to be involved in?
There is. It's I would say it's somewhat of a small community, and the variety of technical abilities and capabilities is large. There are a lot of smaller churches up here. I would say most churches up in Alaska are in the 120 or smaller size. We're at about 500 to 600, so we're classified as a big church up here. So there's not very many larger churches that have the newer digital boards and stuff like that. So those of us who do, we do tend to call each other and beg, borrow, and steal equipment from each other, that type of thing. One of the things that I'm working on is I created an Alaska Media Tech's Facebook page, and that's been a way to kind of build some community. And then I do visit a lot of the other churches just to see what they're doing. And one of the things we're getting ready to do also, another larger church here, we're going to look at try and do at least a yearly or twice a year Media Tech gathering just for the community, and meet at the churches so we can foster relationships and tech knowledge.
And tell us a little bit more about your church specifically. What's your church like? What's your tech team and your production setup?
How long you been on staff as well?
Okay. Yeah, I haven't been on staff very long. That's an interesting story in and of itself. I got to the point where the volunteer hours I was putting in were just too many, and the church had grown. We had, the main worship center, children's worship center, youth worship center. We had all these different, worship environments or worship facilities, and trying to keep all of them going at the same time was too much. So I went to the elders of the church and said, "Hey, you guys need to hire somebody. I can't keep volunteering at this level." If you want to hire somebody, I will help train them. If you want to hire me, I would consider that. But even if you don't hire me, you need to hire somebody. And that just happened not that long ago. It's actually been about less than a year that I've been on staff as a part-time media person at the church. Full-time, I'm a media missionary who works with radio stations, and I work with another church that's smaller, where we do different aspects of media. But my church, we do a 4-camera shoot using Blackmagic switchers. We've got 2-man cameras, 2 PTZs. Our worship team is a typical worship team like you would expect, bass guitar, electric guitar, drum set, Nord Stage 3, usually 3 to 4 vocalists. And then we're running an Allen and Heath SQ6 as our front of house board. We're running Vista for our DMX lighting, Pro Presenter 7 for graphics with a edge blended large screen and center stage.
That's awesome. Sounds like you guys really have a great setup for what you're doing. And I want to go back to something you said about going to your elder team and saying, hey, I'm volunteering a ton. This is not sustainable. I feel like this is something or a lot of our listeners out there are like, whoa, how did you do that? How can you have a conversation saying like, look, I'm really overworked and we need help. So just talk to us about, having that conversation. How did that go? And how would you just give advice on having that specific conversation for a lot of people that are just volunteering way too much out there?
I think the important thing is to make sure that you have the conversation before it starts affecting your attitude. I've been in full-time ministry now for 30-ish years. And I've seen a lot of people burn out, and I saw it happening to me in my church. And I thought, you know what, I've got to tackle this dragon before it eats me. And so the first thing I did was I sat down and made a list. Is this my imagination? All these tasks that I'm feeling swamped with, all these things that we need to do to get ahead. I mean, we're doggy paddling here. If we want to go anywhere, we got to do more than doggy paddle, and I didn't feel like I could do it. So I sat down and made a list. And when that list hit about 40 items that needed to be addressed and different things, some of them were things that needed to be fixed. Other were things that we needed to add and do, and others were requests from leadership. I was like, okay, it's not just my imagination. So I wanted to get it early. I wanted to make sure that that I wasn't imagining it. And then once those two things were in place, I just had a sit down coffee with one of the elders and explained to him and showed him the list of different things that needed to be done. And he agreed that, wow, yeah, this is, there's a lot of stuff here. And so it went from there. But yeah, have it sooner than later before it starts affecting your attitude and your family, and go in educated with it, laid out as the different things that are making you realize that you can't do it all.
And I love how you approach that with humility. I feel like oftentimes we can have this sort of entitlement attitude to go to our pastor or elders and say, look, I'm doing all this stuff. You either need to pay me or pay me more, or I've got to quit. Like, I love how you went and you said, this isn't sustainable. If I think you should hire somebody. If it's not me, that's okay. Like, I'd love to help train that person. If it is me, we can have that conversation. So I love that as just sort of an act of humility, how you approach that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when that blow up happens, just to speak for that person, I think it's because it's so obvious they're getting overworked that they think the pastor's going to notice. Pastor's going to notice. Pastor's going to notice. Pastor's not going to notice. It's not because they're a bad pastor. It's just we don't know the things outside of our roles. And so I think a lot of times that blow up happens when you're hoping for someone to speak up for you, and you got to speak up for yourself like David did.
Well, and it's the and we can get into the whole dynamic of pastors being big picture people and your worship leaders being creatives and your tech people being detail people. That's when it happened for me is I heard, oh, great, we're doing another service in the park in an area where, we may be too far from electricity. We're going to move the entire drum set, all these things on top of what I was already doing. That was the wake up call of, you get to where you're just barely surviving, and then the pastor wants to do something extra and you realize, I don't have it left in me.
So you mentioned different kind of personalities on these, 3 different roles. And then you said you went to one specific elder. Like, did you sort of have an advocate as the tech guy, as a details guy, where you felt like you could have an honest conversation with this specific elder who had the ear of the pastor for you?
Yes, I'm blessed in that regard. That particular elder is one of my video directors, and he spends a lot of time with me. He's gifted in network type things, and so he's helped set up some of our tally lights and different aspects of our media. So he is in the tech booth directing cameras or running a camera at least once a month.
So there's two things there. One, always, like, jokes aside, get an elder on your volunteer team because they're
Absolutely.
they're going to know so much in life. You don't know what you don't know. They'll know. And then secondly, you did a good Survivor move. I'm a huge Survivor fan. It's like my favorite show of all time. You build coalitions one at a time. You don't go to the group, give a big speech to the group. So by going to him, building some goodwill, and then maybe he's talking to some of the elders, that's a really savvy move, I think, is to build buy-in over time per person, so you don't have to have the intimidation of the huge speech all at once.
And I love that our mission as a company is church techs deserve an advocate.
I'm literally getting it printed on the wall.
And so, David, I feel like that
good.
was such, wonderful wisdom for our church techs out there to figure out, like, who in the elders or who on the pastoral staff is your advocate, who's actually a detailed personality that can understand what you go through and speak on your behalf for the pastor. Because I know that those can be really hard conversations when you're like, I'm just the tech guy. How do I go to the senior pastor and tell him I'm totally overwhelmed?
Yeah, they don't see the hours we're putting in. We're there working ideally when nobody else is there because we don't want to be distracted, or we're ringing out a room with loud feedback. So we're trying to be there, but that means, they don't see it. They don't often know.
Which is such a difficult thing. I'm an over communicator. I communicate a lot. Anytime I do something great, Toby has to hear about it like 5 times. So I think techs have the inverse problem.
And luckily that only happens once in a blue moon, Blake.
Well, okay, that was pretty good. Church techs have the opposite
quick.
problem. Church techs are like, they operate at 120% excellence and they'll never tell anybody. And so I think it sucks because it feels like someone should notice, but they're not. And so, like, just kind of hearing that encouragement to, when you're burnt out, let someone know. It sounds like you did a good job of that, and you've got what sounds like a better work-life balance. Word on the street, David, is you're an incredible father. You're always engaging with your kids in cool projects. Like, let's see, what is it we've heard you've been doing? To ice fishing, to rebuilding snow machines. So how do you find the time to engage, as such a great dad, while also meeting all of these needs of the ministry leaders that you serve?
Learning how to say that very difficult to say, but tiny little word, no. And that's been hard. But there have been times when it's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't have the time to do that. So that's one. Another has been training other people. I learned the hard way that being the only one who knows how to run the booth is bad for the church, it's bad for your family, and it's bad for you. So being in a situation a while back where things crashed and burned when I wasn't there because I didn't train well and we weren't deep enough in the front of house mixer position, I really focused hard on trying to make sure that I'm not the only one that knows how to do it. So I can say no with a clear conscience, and that's been huge. Also, just making it a priority. It's tempting when that recliner's sitting over there by the wood stove to pick up a book and sit down and read, but then to realize these kids grow up fast. And if I don't invest into them now, they're not going to want to invest into me when I get older later. So let's be strategic in building relationships now, and also strategic in finding what they're interested in that I have abilities in. And so, when I found out my kids were interested in, guns and snowmobiles and ATVs and the outdoors, hey, that's fun. We can do that together.
Those sound like some Alaskan kids. I think from now on, instead of saying I'm getting older, I'm going to say I'm getting later because that's so much better. David, my best friend's a worship leader, and he's told me if you're the only one, like if service is going to fall apart without you, you're not being as good a leader as you can be. Like a true
Totally
mark of
agree.
a good leader is you're not even there a week and everything goes well. And I've always thought that's pretty smart. I also wonder, Toby, could we make some money selling a book titled "How to Tell Pastor No"? Because I feel like you could write a whole book on that.
100%.
We couldn't write it. We'd have to find the knowledge from tech directors and put it in
we
there.
could just assemble it and then put our names on it and take all the credit.
That's kind of what we do already.
I know.
Oh, don't tell nobody.
Don't tell our listeners.
Well, and Planning Center's been nice too, because you got that ability to hit decline, and you can kind of go scurrying off to the corner and let that do some work for you also.
Oh, that's a good little life hack right there. Just decline the Planning Center invite.
Well, see, we use ClickUp. Don't tell Toby that. He'll just decline things when I task him in ClickUp. Which tasking your boss for something is funny regardless. Is there any other things you would, like duplicating yourself sounds like how you enable that. Is there anything else you would say in that saying no? Because it sounds like you're really skilled at difficult conversations, which is critical for your role. Is there anything else you would say to that bend before we chit chat on other things? Because I know how hard that is for people.
I don't think so. That other than just you gotta come back with. There's a big difference between no and no, I'm sorry because. So letting them know that it's not just a no, but it's I promised my kids that we would go on this snowmobile trip, or I've got a flight coming up to a village that I need to prepare for, or different things like that. So not just saying no and coming across as being the jerk who has a bad attitude, but letting them know there's a reason behind this.
So I feel like we're going to segue just a bit, but you're doing like resource management with your time. Like you got to time manage your own resources as far as your ability to do things. Talk to us about like literal resource management. I know you're in Alaska and you've mentioned, beg, borrow, and steal resources too.
Shipping is hard in Alaska.
And getting things is difficult. So how do you make it work when, budget might be smaller or it's legitimately hard to get things in Alaska?
The first thing is to get the most out of what you've got already. I'm amazed at how many people don't utilize the equipment they have to the full capabilities of the equipment. Read that manual. Take the time to know what it can do. Take the time to get your skills at a level to where you can utilize your existing equipment at what it can do, because new gear is expensive and it takes a long time to get here, and that shipping is brutal. So that's one thing. Another I would say is save up and buy the right gear once. Make sure you're buying decent quality gear. I am a big advocate for buying used quality gear rather than cheap new gear. Buy the right stuff. Cry once. It's going to be more expandable in the future. It's going to be easier for your volunteers to operate. So that's another. And then just because another church has something doesn't mean you necessarily need it. Gear envy is a real deal, but that grass that's greener on the other side of the fence, well, sometimes it's greener because it's growing over the septic tank. And
did you just come up with that? That's funny.
Well, I heard that once before, but it's so good I've reused it a couple times. But I see it so often in churches, especially in smaller churches. I've got to get a digital board. I need that X32 or I need that SQ. And maybe you do, but do your volunteers have the ability to learn how to use it? So being really strategic. I went down with this mega church down in Dallas, and I had the privilege of spending a long time with their media team. I think I spent 7 or 10 days just hanging out with their media team as an intern. And one of the things down there that kept coming up was how we solve problems up here, because we have to get creative. So I actually went and snagged the email address redneckmediadude@gmail.com, because sometimes we got to get a little redneck to make it happen. But yeah, utilize what you've got to the best of your ability.
This is hilarious to me, Blake, because I'm literally next week. I mean, it'll be previously once this episode comes out, but I'm giving a talk on how to hack your church budget on production gear. And I'm taking notes as he's talking. I'm like, this is brilliant. Like he's writing my talk for me. So
one thing we just did, we just bought a Yamaha LS9 from another church up here that upgraded to an SQ7. And, the temptation was, okay, do I go used or do I go new? I could have gone with an X32 or an M32, but I already have an LS9 32 in one of my venues. Is it better to go with a third type of board on my campus or go with another used version of one I already have so that I can cross-train my youth? So my youth now are cross-trained on 2 different venues because we've got the same board, because I was willing to go used.
See, Toby, do you like how he endorsed used, just like we asked? I pay the invoice now, right? Like he did it. He said just what we wanted.
I
You
think
guys can write that check, and I'll give you my address at the
That's
end
right.
of the show.
I got to give props to Dave Roediger because he's the one who recommended this guest,
Oh, well, totally.
obviously.
Okay, so you're talking about cross training your volunteers, which I think we've heard a lot of people say that. I've heard a lot of things actually recently. Read the manual, which every time I'm so glad I don't have to, but I get why people say it. Number two, cross train volunteers, recruit volunteers. Like being willing to buy, like you say, the same board, so that you could have more reach on your volunteers is so critical. So like large churches, they've got more people to pull from. How do you in a lower population area like Alaska draw more volunteers in? And what advice do you give on just, getting volunteers?
Man, I got a whole section on volunteers when I teach my class, but one of the big things is retain the volunteers you've got. First off, if you've got volunteers, make sure you keep them. Give them thank you notes, give them coffee cards, make sure you go up and have a relationship with them, because by golly, you don't want to lose the ones you've got. My problem is I use a lot of youth. And so when they hit 12th grade and they start going to college, I'm losing them. So you've got to realize that even when you do have volunteers, there's attrition that's going to take place. So what I do is I recruit hard from my youth group. And I don't just put a PowerPoint slide up or a ProPresenter slide up. I actually say to the youth leader, hey, can I have 5 minutes? And I come down there and I talk to the youth. I'll have a picture of the broadcast room and the broadcast booth up there. I'll let them know why we do what we do. I'll tell them a story about somebody who's been impacted by the media ministry at the church. Then I make sure that I have a pizza party scheduled about a week after that. And we do basically a show and tell, where at the night that the band is rehearsing, I let them come in and get behind a camera, put on the headphones, and we actually let them play with the cameras. They get free pizza, that gets some of them, and then they come and they get to play with the cameras and different things. So I recruit hard from the youth. Another thing I did one time that really worked well, we didn't have a drummer. We were looking for a drummer for a long time. I put a help wanted sign on the kick drum, and this empty drum set is sitting there with nobody behind it but a big help wanted sign on the kick drum.
That's amazing.
And what is even more amazing is after that service, a lady from the congregation came up and said, so are you guys serious? You really need a drummer? I said, yeah, we do. She goes, my neighbor, I hear him practicing drums because he keeps his window open and he seems like he's pretty good. You want me to tell him about this? And long story short, non-Christian guy starts coming to the church, plays drums for us. His family starts coming. He gets baptized and he played on our worship team for years, all from a help wanted sign on a kick drum. You've got to get creative. Another one is if anybody even slows down when they're walking by your tech booth, my media team is trained. You don't just say hi. You say, hey, are you interested in this stuff? Well, yeah, I used to run it at a previous church. That's awesome. Hey, come on in the booth. And then we give them a full tech tour. Another one is we set up tables at the back of the church every once in a while that doesn't just have a sign-up sheet, but I set up a camera on a tripod hooked to a TV. And then I set up a little Mackie 16-channel mixer with a built-in effects and headphones and a microphone, and let them play with the gear. So, and another is word of mouth. And then another is, your biggest recruiters are your volunteers that you already have. So those are my big things on volunteers.
How do you do the mind blown emoji like in real life?
Yeah, David is spinning gold. I typically do this, Toby.
Yeah.
You put your hands on your head and then move outward.
I mean, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a help wanted sign on Blake.
Well, that would be awkward to find out. Oh, would you like to be me?
Just get him a t-shirt with that on it.
Yeah.
That actually would be really funny. Okay, so I love everything you just said.
Everything.
Dennis Choi talks a lot about training your volunteers to recruit. And if I was summing up what you just said in two big overall points, it's like, number one, be strategic. Like think further than the obvious step. And then step two is get visual. Like that help wanted sign on a drum just saved a whole family from the grips of hell. Like that's crazy. So be strategic, think and think visually.
Maybe we should make
and we were even strategic. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Dave.
We were even strategic in the placement of our booth because we just built a 500-seat worship center. And when we went in there, we thought about a lot of different things. And most people want that booth on the back wall. And then they have an aisle in the front of the booth that people use to get from the left to the right in the worship center. We got to thinking, wait a minute, we want the booth away from the back wall. And so now our chairs come directly up to the front of our booth. What that did for us was it got our booth off the back wall for better acoustics for mixing, but it also made our booth much more visual to people when they walk in the room, because they're walking by the back of the booth, looking in at all the flashing lights and colored screens and different things. So even something as simple as booth placement in a remodel or new construction can be a huge recruiting tool in and of itself.
And David, do you do any like specific things as far as making your team members feel like they're part of the team? Like a new volunteer comes in and like, here's your hat and here's your shirt, or, you know, do you have any sort of like team specific stuff that you do to make people feel welcome and involved?
That's something that I think is an excellent idea and something we're not doing. Budget is really tight for us. We've talked about team t-shirts. We've had some lanyards made, media team, that type of thing, but I don't now, but I love that idea. I know a lot of churches do, and I've seen some really great media shirts out there.
See, I'll just say this publicly, we're trying to work on some of that. Like we're working on with some drop shipping to get some cool, like the tech community needs some not cooler, but like some options of like some fun, witty tech stuff. And I'd love for one day, like just whole tech teams are outfitted in these.
And apparently one of the options is a t-shirt that says "Help Wanted."
That's actually, yes. So David, you've spun so much gold, I feel guilty asking for a tech takeaway from you, but I got to do it. So what would be your tech takeaway, your Alaskan tech takeaway?
Can I give you a couple?
Yes, you can.
One for larger churches and one for smaller churches. And just real quick, I did some research on church size, and I was shocked to discover that of the churches in the United States, 94%, I'm going to say that again, 94% of the churches in the United States are under 500 people in size. I think a lot of people don't realize that. So if you're in a smaller church, realize there's a lot of brothers and sisters in Christ that are in that smaller church with you. So that was a staggering number to me that many. So I'm speaking now to the larger churches. Realize that you've got a lot of brothers and sisters in Christ who are struggling. In the larger churches, often there's people who are specialized. You've got one lighting guy, you've got one video guy, you've got one audio guy. In the smaller churches, we got one guy. And so we're not able to be as deep in the specific disciplines. And so if you're in a larger church, I encourage you to build relationships with some of the smaller churches in your community. We're all working toward the same goal. So mentor your brothers and sisters in Christ and realize that often they feel lonely and isolated. For the smaller churches, remember why you're doing what you're doing. We're not just doing this to play with equipment. That's part of it. And a lot of us do it because we enjoy it. But remember the why behind it when it gets hard, when it gets tough. And then the other thing for the smaller churches and for the larger churches also, we've got a creek behind our church. That's why we're called Creekside. And it doesn't have a lot of current. You could wade across it and not get carried downstream. But if I were to put a canoe in that creek and step back and do nothing, that canoe is going to wash downstream and eventually end up in the ocean if you don't have any momentum or anything going on with it. That's where I think a lot of smaller churches especially is they're not learning. So the other thing is always be learning. It's so easy with social media, books, technology right now to learn. If you're not learning, you're drifting downriver. You're not staying where you are. I think it's an assumption that's incorrect to think that, I don't have to be learning. I know what I'm doing. No, your equipment's getting older. Your firmware needs to be updated on your board. You need to always be learning or you're not going to make any progress. You're actually going to be drifting downstream.
Toby, I feel like I could run through a wall. This has like been part educational, part pep talk. And I love that stat on the smaller churches because, and one of the reasons is we had you on is I was like, give me someone who's worked at a smaller church. I want to highlight these more often. Like I want people to know that that's, as you say, more the norm. And like, let's have some real practical, info for them. And so, David, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man.
Oh, it's been a privilege. You guys don't know it, but I've listened to your podcast. I don't know how many hours of podcasts with you guys as I'm making my breakfast in the morning. It's just my ritual to turn on your podcast. And so it's been fun to be a part of a discussion that's important. And you guys have blessed me immensely over the last several months as I've listened to a lot of wisdom from other church texts and you guys yourselves.
Toby, I feel like we're making David dumber if he's listening to us.
100%.
I feel guilty. Well, man, that's very kind of you to say. I really hope this podcast can be an encouragement. For techs, like one, as you say, like people can be really isolated. And so I hope it reminds everyone how we're all in it together. And then two, I hope, we can teach them something. Not we, me, and Toby, the guest that comes on. You have anything you want to plug before we hop off here?
I'll just say, if you want to follow me, you're welcome to. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as David Horning. Actually, I think it's Instagram. It's under Snow Rider because I ride snowmobiles. And I hesitate to throw this out there. Edit it out if you want, but we are faith-based missionaries, and as our support base gets older, a lot of the people who have supported us, God's calling them home, and so we have to raise our support to be here from churches, family, and friends. And if your media team wants to support a media missionary in Alaska, hit me up, Redneck Media Dude, or you can go to horningsonline.com. That's my website.
I'll totally include that in the show notes. But yeah, man, we appreciate you coming on.
It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, this is honestly one of my favorite episodes of all time. And I feel like David gave so much to the tech community and all that wisdom, and all you and I gave was stories of poop.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. We started off maybe our crudest intro when David was spinning yarn. We were spinning tales of, I'm not going to say it.
Is there anything more that we can give the tech community than just stories of poop?
Well, I'll tell you something that's not a load of crap. It's the 11% off coupon at churchgear.com.
We're so getting canceled.
Use code podcast for 11% off to save on our non-crappy gear. Okay.